Okay. I was originally going to make this a 3-part sort of series about the Steven Universe movie and the show as a whole that could have been summed up with Steg is bad, Diamonds are worse, Rose is good, everybody stop. But I didn't want my first 3 big videos on this channel to be overtly negative criticism. I'm a relatively positive person most of the time, and most of my criticisms on both Steg and the Diamonds have been repeated ad nauseum from hundreds of different fans. So I'm fine letting innuendo and space Nazis lie. But what I haven't heard much of is defense of Rose Quartz, as people are leaning towards scapegoating her over addressing the Diamonds in any reasonable capacity. And her story is important to me, so let's jump right into this argument. There has been a long-growing side of the Steven Universe community, and to an extent its creators, that have been cornering the character of Rose Quartz into the true main antagonist of the show and the secret villain among villains. I mean, just the worst. Look at her. She abandoned everyone. She strung Pearl along and basically abused her, locked away Bismuth because she's so selfish. She should have just admitted she was Pink Diamond. Like, look how sad she made Blue Diamond. She left Spinel on purpose. The humans, the real Rose Quartzes. And then she left everyone to make Steven just so she could run away from her problems. Clearly, everything she has ever done was in her own self-interest and cowardice. The Steven Universe movie seems to be the final nail in the coffin for the majority of fans to see her this way. And this is it. This is the hill I have to die on, because this is embarrassing. Here's the too long don't read at the beginning of the video. Rose did barely anything wrong. Everything people blame her for is solely the Diamond's fault. Fight me. Okay, so I'm going to start with the complete list of everything the narrative and the fandom collectively see as her fault, and her being selfish or manipulative, and work my way through them all. I'll bring up some individuals who talk about Rose in relation to these issues to keep myself from creating a straw man, but I want to be clear that I'm not upset at any of these people. Interpreting a piece of fiction differently than me isn't a cause for war, no matter how much fandom might imply as such. Okay, so the general consensus is that Rose is morally gray, and her crimes are: she didn't tell the rebellion of her status as a diamond, she bubbled Bismuth and told no one, she faked her own death, and that caused every gem on Earth to be corrupted. She left Spinel alone on purpose for 6,000 years. She left Pink Pearl in a similar manner. Her real death was selfish, and she just abandoned everyone. And she left Steven to deal with all of her problems. So, when you list it off like this, it sure does seem like Rose Quartz is a selfish brat, huh? But here's the thing. Hardly any of this is even true, and the rest is far more nuanced than anyone gives it credit for. I'll start with her choosing to keep her status a secret, since, from my perspective, this leads to the only real character mistake she ever makes, and not even like you'd think. And to be clear, I'm separating character mistakes from things that went wrong. A character mistake is a decision or action that a character makes due to a flaw in themselves, something they have to grow out of and admit was wrong. Where something that went wrong is just an event that worked out incorrectly. For example, Lapis taking pleasure in hurting Jasper versus Peridot stealing the communicator to try and reason with Yellow Diamond. The first is something Lapis had to address and grow away from, and admit was unhealthy. The second was a tactical error coming from a good mental space on Peridot's part. When Rose first got Earth as a colony and she found that what they were doing would kill it and that she didn't want to do that, we see her try and stop the colonization through what little actual power she had, to no avail. And we've seen how controlling, physically abusive, and threatening the Diamonds are to her. When she decides to take a stand, with the only goal of freeing Earth, herself, and Pearl, she takes on a persona for some very obvious reasons. At the beginning, she has no army or allies, and the Diamonds could individually destroy her, or, more honestly, destroy Pearl, in less than a moment if they discover that she was defecting, taking Earth away from her forever and permanently damaging a lot of people she cares about. Starting the rebellion as Pink Diamond means it wouldn't have started at all. Not only did she have to make the rebellion come off as inconsequential to the other Diamonds, But keeping her position as the coordinator of the colony allowed her to sabotage on both sides, making it a really smart move and also the only option. Rose had to be overly cautious about being found out because, as has been demonstrated many times by all three diamonds, they regularly use the threat of hurting people she cares about as a punishment for her stepping out of line. This kind of display of violence is a tactic abusive parents use to demonstrate something very specific. Parents violently destroy their child's things and what they care about to say, very plainly, next time, this will be you. The diamonds did this with Pink Pearl, and made it very clear that any gem that Rose cared about is at risk in the same way. The humans they held hostage, Pearl, the Pebbles, Spinel, it was imperative that the diamonds specifically did not find out who Rose was. But you may ask, why didn't she tell the rebellion once it gathered, Cherry? They deserved the truth. Because of gems like Bismuth. The larger rebellion was formed under the goal of escaping homeworld dictatorship. Crystal gems enthusiastic about shattering a diamond were definitely not going to be in the minority. And they weren't wrong, let me be clear. Revolting against violent fascism is good, and redeeming space Nazis is not the right call. But this is a different topic. What matters is that they were in the middle of a war, and Pink Diamond was the symbolic figurehead of their enemy, and Rose had every reason to believe that coming clean at this point would likely be disastrous. Which leads to Bismuth. How could she bubble Bismuth and not even tell anyone? Well, let me ask you this. If Bismuth was enthusiastically showing Rose a weapon meant specifically for her alter ego, and when she disagreed, Bismuth was ready to kill her right on the dime, why do you think Rose telling Bismuth, "It's because I am Pink Diamond," would make the gem currently trying to kill her, as Rose, want to kill her any less? And after that, how does one tell the rebellion, who, as previously explained, she also can't reveal her identity to, why their comrade tried to murder her? Can anyone tell me what Rose should have done here? Because what I see is a really hard situation with no right answer. Bismuth wasn't wrong. Rose wasn't wrong. But the context couldn't be explained at the time, and the best she could do was try and keep Bismuth in stasis until things calmed down and she could explain. But after the diamond attack, that was never going to happen. Now, here is where I think Rose really did mess up. Pretty bad. After she tried to end the war by faking her death, after everything was over, she didn't tell Garnet and she didn't unbubble Bismuth. That was a mistake on her part. Everything had gone wrong in the second worst way possible, and Rose kept her secret in shame indefinitely. When she decided to have Stephen 6,000 years later, she clearly left Bismuth for him to find, but that wasn't enough. Garnet and Bismuth deserved to have that hard conversation, and she was being cowardly by trying to avoid it. Now, let's talk about the end of the war, shall we? Firstly, no one tell me it's Rose's fault that the gems were corrupted. I'm going to go fucking apeshit. The diamonds did that. Literally and directly. Fuck you if you blame Rose for not predicting her abusive parents' crazy fucking behavior. And her reasoning for faking her shattering was sound logic to end the war. It was incorrect, but from the context she had, it was the best shot. The crystal gems were vastly outnumbered and were only staying afloat by keeping the other diamonds uninvolved, which means even if they could start doing more effective damage, it would only cause the full force of yellow and blue to wipe them out in a moment. The rebellion was painted into a corner. Either be slowly eliminated by virtue of running out of time, or be immediately obliterated by a force magnitudes more powerful than them and willing to shatter. But to Rose, from how they treat her and what she knows about the diamonds, she thinks the only way to effectively get the planet free without involving the diamonds directly, and her only chance to personally escape her abuse, is to get rid of her. She didn't think the diamonds had any real attachment to her, and that if she made it impossible to justify the cost of the fight, they would move on logically. That's what the perfect diamond authority would do. See it as a minor, irrelevant loss. She didn't expect petty, violent revenge, but that's how abusive parents are. Unpredictable, spiteful, terrifying. She tried her best, but she's fighting brutality incarnate. There was no clean solution. Jesus, it's hard to talk about how actively sadistic the Diamonds are. So now that we're past everything that happened in the war, let's keep talking about exactly that. So people also cite Rose leaving behind Spinel and Pink Pearl as evidence for her being selfish and fickle, and how she doesn't have empathy or respect for others, postulating that she sees other beings like toys. Well, what if I told you that you're all fucking stupid? Pink Pearl was and has been under direct control of White Diamond, and is more than likely like that because Rose upset the Diamonds in some minor way, and it was another one of those previously mentioned shows of violent force as a direct threat. There was literally nothing she could do for Pink Pearl. White Diamond is a monster. Now, Spinel. I can't tell you why Rose never went back to the garden for Spinel, but I can definitely tell you that you don't know either. We have only heard Spinel's perspective of this event, which was Rose telling her to stay still, promising she'd be back, and then not coming back. We can clearly see how this is not the full story, but we all, myself included, were empathizing so hard with Spinel during that scene that we didn't really notice that. Now, I'm going to propose a scenario, one that is just speculation, but is quite in character with context. We saw in Spinel's flashback that Rose was given the news that she would get Earth in the garden, and her leaving was her first time to Earth. Blue and Yellow were both at what seemed to be the Earth moon base, telling her that this is a very serious thing, and telling her to come there to be debriefed. So imagine, Rose knows that they're expecting her to take this seriously, something Spinel definitely is not. She decides to go to the moon base alone first to show the Diamonds that she isn't there to play and she's not going to take it lightly. She promises Spinel she'll be right back, and if she stays still she'll get a prize, and goes to get debriefed on how to run a colony. Only for Blue and Yellow to lock her from the garden warp pad when she gets there. When she objects, Yellow says something along the lines of, "You wanted a colony and now you've got it. This is a serious job and you're a Diamond. It is time you prove that you can act like it." To which Blue follows, "You can play with your Spinel after you've finished your colony. We just want to make sure you stay focused. White needs to be impressed." And then the rebellion starts, never giving her the ability to go back for Spinel, just like the humans and the rose quartz Blue and Yellow took hostage. Again, this is just speculation, but we have no actual reason to believe she intended to leave Spinel permanently. From my own experience, when you're escaping an abusive household, especially one where you're being physically beaten or you're actively unsafe, you don't always have the power to bring everyone with you. There are people, friends, pets, siblings, you can't take with you, who are being hurt in the same circumstances, but you can't blame yourself for getting away in the situation that they're left in. That's survivor's guilt, and it's not healthy. Enough about Homeworld and about Rose's origins. What about what she did on Earth? You can't use abuse as an excuse for more abuse, Jerry. But can you tell me what she did after the war that was even actually bad? At all? She lived with the remaining crystal gems for 6,000 years happily, all of them doing their best to keep the victims of the diamond attack safe and bubbled. She had several relationships with humans while maintaining her romantic involvement with Pearl, and is that it? Is that what she did selfishly? Pearl has been shown from our perspective to not really have been on board with Rose having romantic relationship with humans. And to us, she was clearly not on board with Rose having a child. But we've also seen Pearl telling Rose the literal opposite every single time. In It's Over, Isn't It?, Pearl says that she was fine with Rose having previous relationships before Greg, and we can postulate that she told Rose as much before Greg. But we also saw that she never directly told Rose she was uncomfortable with him. All of her dissent went passive-aggressively to Greg, never directly in view of Rose. And Pearl not communicating with Rose on a level field is a problem. Up until the very end, Pearl put Rose on a pedestal. Even as Rose did her best to drive home that they were equals now, Pearl never got past to this ideation. And this only perpetuated Rose taking a long time to properly learn social interaction and how to be more tact and considerate. They both needed to grow on this, and Greg was a really good catalyst for them both on that. It's not entirely Pearl's fault that Rose didn't notice her passive cues, and that she wasn't on board with polyamory, but it's also not Rose's fault that Pearl was lying to her about it. They're bad at this. In Rose's own words, we've been told that gems can't be kids. They can't grow up. But the point of the whole show is that that assumption is incorrect. Gems are just as able to grow and learn naturally when given the choice. It's Homeworld that forces gems to be what they're supposed to be immediately. And as for Rose choosing to give up her life to make Steven, how was that selfish? Jesus Christ, everyone who talks about this one acts like she did this as a fucking surprise. We were shown her consulting with the gems on this, and Greg definitely had to fucking agree, guys. Holy shit. Nobody, including Rose, knew the details about how this would play out. Rose thought she would become half of Steven. Amethyst thought it was going to be an elaborate shapeshift. Garnet thought it would be a new type of fusion. They were all walking into the unknown, but they all gave the thumbs up on it. Pearl was lying about being on board, but as I said, that's not on Rose. Now, the final thing people admonish Rose for is that she had Steven as a way to run away from her problems and left Steven to pick up the pieces. And that's just not true. It had been hammered home that Rose wanted to create life just for the sake of creating life. Something that she had been fascinated and in love with since before she was given Earth. Rose was on aerial levels of passionate about anthropology and biology. The secret room that Steven found on Homeworld was where she was doing her own experiments to create the pebbles. The only reason she wanted a colony at all was to see life get created. She defended the Earth because the natural life there left her in awe. That is who she is. Someone who is absolutely in love with life and individuality. Of course she wanted to have a child. But I would agree that she did plan to have Steven deal with some of her mistakes. One mistake. Bismuth. The only real character mistake she ever made. She left Bismuth in Lion with Steven's tape, knowing that he'd find it and hoping that now that everything was settled, now that she thought Homeworld was gone for good and there was no threat, that Steven and the Crystal Gems could set the record straight and give Bismuth back her freedom. But she and no Crystal Gem knew that Homeworld was coming back. They had no idea about the cluster or its imminent emergence. It had been 6,000 years without a trace of Homeworld, and they all thought that they were safe. Rose didn't want Steven to deal with any of this. So, yeah. Rose did hardly anything wrong and tried her best. She's not morally gray, she's not a villain. She's a child who saved a planet, grew up, had a kid, and became a scapegoat for her abusers. What's the moral here? Fuck White Diamond.